What kind of Asian are you? Well, what kind of Asian are you, motherfucker? Pardon my Cantonese. What kind of Chinese are you, Can you use chopsticks and do karate? Shit. What? What kind of Asian am I? I'm Korean American. I'm an Asian American immigrant. I'm Asian diaspora. And chances are, if you're listening to this, you might be too, or you might be a cheeky halfie, a cheeky happa, or some other form of third culture kid, or you might not be any of these, but you're just interested in hearing a different perspective. So today we have a fucking awesome guest, and I'm super fucking pumped for this episode. We have Kyle Leung. He's the host of the podcast, What Kind of Asian Are You? He's Hong Kong born Canadian and talks with Asian diaspora from all over the world about their experiences, sharing their stories and amplifying their perspectives. And we talk a lot of Asian diaspora stuff, as you might imagine, what it's like growing up as Asian immigrants in North America, coming back to Asia, and pursuing meaning in our identity, our heritage, our lives, and becoming better versions of ourselves. We talk about how being Asian diaspora means being forced to pick a side and the confusion that follows, the variety of the Asian diaspora experience, and getting in touch with our roots. Not taking things personally when people try to put us in a box. Accepting ourselves for who we are and being happy with being in the middle. Becoming happy with being you and not wanting to be someone else, another ethnicity. Wanting to communicate and connect better with our parents to have more honest, open, loving relationships. Whether or not it's important to connect to one's own heritage or mother tongue and the benefits of doing so. How having these conversations and coming to understand and appreciate our identity can empower us to become better people, and so much more. If you're Korean American like me, or Canadian born Chinese, or Chinese French, or Japanese Brazilian, whatever you may be, then you got to check out his podcast. If you're Asian diaspora, you got to check out the What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. I was so excited to talk with Kyle that I think I talked too much. And there were a bunch of questions that I didn't get to ask him. So I definitely want him on the show again. And I wish I had his podcast when I was a kid, because I felt like it could have helped me with so many of the problems and the issues with identity struggle that I grew up with. So if you relate at all, please give this episode a listen and please go check out his podcast. If you got anything out of this episode, and you know someone who's curious about getting in touch with their roots or going through some identity struggle issues, being a third culture kid or Asian diaspora or whatever you want to call it, then please share it with them. It might help them out. I wish someone had shared these kinds of conversations with me, but I didn't have the internet growing up, or even if there were resources and people having these conversations, I just didn't have access to it. So you might be doing someone a huge favor if they're willing and ready to listen to these kinds of conversations. So please leave a 5-star rating if you enjoyed the episode and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's get it hard. You know what time it is? It's mime time. Good morning, Kyle. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. It's nice to be able to hop on this chat with you, learn from you, make a new friend. I mean, we are recently acquainted, so it's exciting to learn from each other and become quick friends through recording a podcast.
This is great. I'm really excited. Oh, by the way, welcome Mime Timers, Mime Time listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Yeah, we have Kyle Leung, and I came across his podcast last week, actually. And it's called What Kind of Asian Are You? What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. And then when I found that podcast, I was like, what kind of Asian am I? This is a question I've had since I was a kid, actually, which is funny enough. But Kyle, can you please tell us about yourself. Tell us, what's your podcast all about?
Hello, listeners. My name is Kyle. I'm the host of What Kind of Asian Are You podcast, a podcast dedicated to telling the stories of Asian diaspora or Asian people as a whole, because I want to highlight, amplify, and validate their voices during a time when I feel mainstream media in the West not really caring about Asian diaspora stories as a whole. And, to be frank, Asians as a whole don't really care about Asian diaspora stories either, because they don't feel like, oh, they need to, because they have their own kind of stories and experiences. So I want to use my podcast to give a platform to those that, should have their voices heard. And I've been doing it for close to a year, interviewing people from from all facts of life, from singers, dancers, comedians, YouTubers, content creators, and business people, everyone that, you can think of that you might be interested in or you can relate to. At least I hope. A little bit about me. I am from Hong Kong originally. I was born there, and then I immigrated to Canada with a family when I was about 5, and I lived there since. But now I'm in Singapore after about 3 years in Taiwan teaching English, and now I'm here in Singapore with my wife, who's a Singaporean.
That's awesome. For first-time listeners, if you don't know my backstory, I was born in Korea, but my family moved to America when I was 1, and so I didn't keep any of the language. Maybe like when I was 2 or 3, maybe I spoke a little bit, but otherwise, like I'm pretty whitewashed. And I grew up in America my whole life, not learning Korean, not being really in touch with my roots. Even though I grew up in a Korean family, in a Korean household, I went to school and I was a lot of times the only Asian kid in my class, or like in my homeroom class. And so there's pictures of me, in a sea of white kids or some black kids or Hispanic, and like it's just me being the only Asian. So I grew up in different parts of the States. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. And then I came back to Korea in 2012, about 9 years ago. And I came back to Korea to find my roots and, try to find some work. And that was also like English tutoring. And I'm still here in Korea. And in that time, I've had many amazing travels and adventures and wonderful chats. And I'm really happy to be here with Kyle, sharing our experiences together. And Kyle, I just want to say that your podcast is the fucking shit. Like this shit that we talk about, that you talk about, is so important. I mean, in one way, like, damn, I should have just named my shit, What Kind of Asian Are You? Damn, he stole my idea. No, I think the brands and the message and what you're doing to amplify the diaspora voices, man, this is perfect. Like this is the shit that I needed, Kyle. Where were you? God damn it. Where were you when I was 15, confused with my identity and I didn't have anybody to connect with this? Where were you? This is all your fault, Kyle, for not,
I'm sorry, but when you were 15, I was around the same age too. And I was also trying to figure out my identity as well. So I can help you before helping myself. And I feel like even though I'm doing this podcast where I'm asking a lot of diaspora about their life and their experience, I still haven't really completely figured it out. And I don't think my guests have either. And I think it's a lifelong journey, and we should be okay with that. We should appreciate that. We should appreciate that, we're constantly looking for answers and figuring out our way and figuring out how to accept our dual identities.
But see, that's the perfect thing to say. And it's actually not that complicated, that attitude. It's just like, you know what? It's a lifelong journey. And just to accept it and just to be cool with it. I want to delve deep into this shit with you. I mean, hard. I want to get into it with you hard. We have so
I'm
much
ready.
to talk
Let's
about,
go.
but,
Let's do this.
bro, like, what does it mean to be Asian diaspora or immigrant for you? What's the significance of it to you? And how are we different from Asians who grew up in Asia? Right? Listeners may already get this. Sorry, it might be obvious, but what from your perspective, I want to hear it.
That's a really good question. And honestly, I think I have this kind of discussion with other people a lot, very often as well. And just a question that I have in my mind often. And to be honest, I think for me, the difference, or at least what makes Asian diaspora different from just, Asians in Asia is that we are put in the position where we're forced, in a sense, to pick a side. We are forced to either be very Western or very Asian, meaning that you are supposed to have only one singular identity or that you can assimilate to either sides. And I think it's tough when you still have your parental influences that are from the East that, they might not completely assimilate to Western culture. So they still have a huge Eastern kind of mindset that they will instill in you. But at the same time, in your everyday schooling and your interaction with other people that's not Eastern minded, you'll have that Western influences put into you too. And when those two put together, you're now becoming something that's realistically a mixture of everything. And when you become a mixture of everything, you're not one single thing. But with how the world is set up, they prefer you to be one singular thing. I don't know if you agree with that, but like they find it easier to be able to like put you in a box. Oh, you're white, you're Asian, you're blah blah. And if you're like a mix of everything, they don't know how to really put you as a person. Or like they think, then what are you? Are you with us? Are you with them? Like the constant kind of, what team are you in? I think that's the biggest thing I see. And to be honest, you're not able to fit in anywhere as, Asian diaspora because you got everything, but you're not having the complete kind of thing because you're not going to be able to completely be well versed in what's happening in Asia. At the same time, when you're in the West, you're not exactly able to know all the cultural kind of nuances that other people in the Western society have because you also have that Eastern influence. Do you relate to that part too, or do you see it differently?
Well, obviously, 100%. Yeah, that's a really good description, I think, of the Asian diaspora experience. That we're not completely in one or the other, and so people want to put you in the box. And here's something that I want to talk about on my podcast, which is that I've come to a point in my life where I've learned to accept that that's just human. It's not like a great moral evil or an injustice upon people. And I might trigger Asian diaspora by saying this, but people put you in a box and I put people in boxes. I have my whole life and we all do. When we try to identify people and we put people in boxes, do we do it in the most gentlemanly, lady, compassionate, understanding way? Maybe a lot of times, no. But it's a human thing that people want to categorize other people and that people wanted to categorize me because they're trying to figure out who I am. And it wasn't necessarily an aggressive thing or a microaggression or something like that. That's how I look at it now. It's just human because for, however many tens of thousands of years, we grew up in distinct geographical locations with distinct languages, and our whole lives, our ancestors' lives, our grandparents' lives or whatever, they only lived within, the same ethnicity, and everyone spoke the same language and looked pretty similarly. Like, I think this is a general pattern throughout all societies that, hey, everyone, if you live in a certain area, a lot of people generally look the same, speak the same. They have this similarity and they have similar culture within the same tribe. And so when there's a new variable, then people are like, well, what is that? That thing doesn't look like us. That animal doesn't look like us animals. So, what's that all about? It's pattern recognition. And so I want to tell people, like, if you have trauma like I do of being put in a box, for me, I've come to a point where I just accept it. It's not because it doesn't help me to get triggered every single time someone puts me in a box. And for me, my name is Mime, which is a very unique name. And it's spelled M-A-I-M. What my name taught me, which I hated when I was a kid, because kids are mean. They make fun of you. It's like, oh, if your name is James, then you're James the Lames or whatever, right? If your name is Kyle, you're Kyle. Fuck you. I don't know.
It's a lot easier when
Right.
you were a kid to make up names to make fun of other people. I guess.
Right.
But
So
I think,
yeah.
I get what you're saying. But I just want to ask you, like, you mentioned, like, you just gotta accept it. But is the accepting part the same as you being defeated? Because I think there are two different things. Because I think it's okay to accept, but it shouldn't be where you're defeated by all the things that are happening to you. Because I don't think we should be self defeating in a sense.
Oh, no, I don't find it self-defeating at all. I'm not saying roll over like a bitch. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Hmm.
I'm saying it's better to put your energy elsewhere, and it's better to win people over as opposed to being defensive for people putting in your box. It's better to have rapport, understand where they're coming from, and then later win them over. And then if you want to say educate people, right? Because us, we're so enlightened than everyone else, then we can educate them as like, hey, there's a better way to ask people where they're from than saying, what kind of Chinese are you? What kind of Asian are you?
Mm,
There's a better, more nuanced way, and it's natural for people to be curious. Like if you've never seen an Asian before, then you're gonna say, you might say something stupid like that, but you weren't educated any better, and I don't think that makes you a bad person. I don't find this self-defeating at all. And the reason why I bring up my name is because I realized that people were confused with my name. So not only like when I'm the only Asian kid that a lot of these kids or people have seen, not only am I the first Asian, they've never heard a name like mine. Obviously, if it's, and they might not be able to tell the difference, like, because they've never heard an Asian name or a Korean name like Sujin or Hyunjae or whatever. But my name's not like that. My name is not Korean. It's not even
mhm,
so my name is not even Asian. So that's another extra variable that I had growing up. It's spelled MAIM. In English, that's maim, like to dismember someone, to remove the limb, right? Like a bomb
mhm,
goes off and the soldier was maimed. Okay.
mm.
So some people I meet, they're like, oh, your name is spelled maim? Like, that's pretty metal, man. That's cool. But I would get triggered and I would get offended by that at some point. And so whenever people mispronounce my name, they call me Mame. I got so triggered. I got so mad because no, my name is pronounced Mime, MAIM. Oh, but wait, in English, because I was a nerd and I would just read the dictionary and study words. Oh, May means it's not their fault that they don't know how to pronounce my name when they read it. It's completely human. If I were them, I would make the same mistake
They have different
trying
set
to
of
say my name.
references.
Exactly. And that's not their fault. So then I realized, oh, not only am I Asian, which is different, an Asian minority, but also even within Korean people. So Korean people also say, oh, mine, that's an interesting name. Is that like, what's your Korean name? Right? Well, what the fuck, right? What? So my life is unfair. Like, why am I so different? People making fun of me, and whenever people mention how my name is different, like my name, it's your identity. Your name is who you are, right? In your mind, in your, to your ego, your name is deeply, it's like central to your identity in a way. So that's when I came to realize, oh, if my name is this unknown variable that people have never met before, and they're like mispronouncing, it doesn't make logical sense for me to interpret that as aggression or malice or them trying to undermine me. Even though kids did make fun of my name, kids will make fun of any name. So that's what I want to say is that, it's just, it's nothing to take personal. And so as I grew up for years as a kid, people making fun of my name, is at some point it clicked that, oh no, actually my name is unique and different and beautiful. And if other people are mispronouncing it or whatever, and so many times people say, oh, mine, that's a beautiful name. That's a cool name or whatever. But even when I was a kid, I heard that I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't accept it. So if someone had just told me these things, like, hey, mine, like if my father was a more, enlightened parent, God bless him, man, he told me, hey, mom, you have a special, beautiful name. Don't let any other kids ever like fuck with you. Don't. Okay, it's spelled MAIM. Maybe that was our fault. My mom actually told me this. My mom said, no, mom, your name should have been spelled MAYIM. So she actually tried to change my name spelling when I was like 9 or 10. And I
Mhm.
was like, mom, it's too late. I'm
Yeah.
MAIM. But anyways, I've talked at length with this about Asian diaspora. But what I want to say, going back to what you said about the Asian diaspora experience being put in a box, for me, I kind of want to say I'm better off personally not taking things personally.
I think for me, it's not a matter of being put into a box. Like I think my internal struggle with identity is more on my own because I think one of the things I learned is like people don't really care about you as much as you care about yourself and how they see you. Like for all you know, whatever you think they are thinking about, you're just projecting those things onto them. And that it's not you feeling however you feel. It might be something to do with what the outside factors are, but at the end of the day, is what you bring into your own life. And I think I like to say this a lot in my podcast is like your identity, your struggle, it's all on you. And of course, things are hard, but no, you are the one that will be the ultimate person to get through it if you choose to. It's not people getting better at doing what they're supposed to be, being kinder, that will make you feel more like at home with your identity. It's what you decide to do with your own life. That's how I kind of look at it. Like your identity issues, you have to solve it on your own. As much as it's hard, as there's no way out of that.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's true. And I think as Asian diaspora, we think maybe like I did growing up thinking that my struggle was so unique, being the only Asian kid who, who doesn't even speak his own mother tongue and having all this, like my life is so fucking unfair. Why is it that my family's the only family that can't even speak English properly? I speak English better than everyone else. English is my first language. All this stuff. Yeah, I've had to come up and I've had to grow up and figure these things out on our own. And that's a struggle, a unique struggle that all Asian diaspora or third culture kids, that's the unique struggle that we all have as individuals. And the beauty of it is that we have to deal with this identity issues on our own. We have to grow up and we have to resolve these things on our own. And it might, you can look at it as a burden and you can look at it as a struggle, but it's also a great privilege because with that comes insight and compassion and all the potential to like understand humanity from a more broader perspective, right? Because while you will never be 100% immersed in one culture or another, it gives you a broader perspective and you can see and examine the best and worst parts of either or culture or your preference, what you prefer. And then later on, you can combine those to create an even stronger combination, arguably, of a person or even as a mini or a sub community or society of people who have these multiple different perspectives and cultural backgrounds, and then you join together and then you make something arguably even better and stronger. Just for more background on you, Kyle, what was it like for you growing up in Canada?
I moved to Canada when I was about 5, and for most of my life, actually, I don't know if it's fortunate or lucky or whatever it may be that I ended up living in an Asian enclave. So, meaning the area that I lived in was heavily Asian, specifically Chinese immigrants or Chinese people as a whole that are in Canada. So I lived in like an Asian bubble. There were other Asian in that bubble as well, but majority of them were Chinese. So I always felt at home. I never got made fun of for my lunch boxes, or like no one had a problem with my parents not necessarily speaking perfect English because everyone else had parents that probably didn't have perfect English either. And yeah, I didn't feel like there were really racism on in this part of my life. And I think, no, I definitely was privileged to be able to have my life in an Asian enclave so that, no, I kept my, no, certain cultural stuff alive. So I'm able to speak the language. I'm able to communicate with my parents, no, in the language that, oh, our mother tongue is not perfect, but at least it won't be where, oh, I only know English and they're not perfect in English in terms of speaking. So that being said, I think me being in an Asian enclave made me feel no so in the middle because I realized when I get out of that Asian enclave and I get out of the area that I lived in, I don't feel too comfortable. At least at the start. I didn't feel like, oh, I had anything to relate to the other people that's not in that Asian enclave. Especially when I got into university where I moved to another town where there's a university campus. So it had a lot of different other people and the Asian enclave wasn't there. It was all kind of mainstream white society, white culture. And when I talked to people there, I didn't feel like I could relate on the same level of like Asian or just childhood experiences because they did a lot of mainstream Canadian things. When for me, I did some of them, but not completely. I did a lot of like Asian enclave stuff that they never know or like they had no idea about. So with that, I kind of felt, oh, I don't relate to that. But then for my own self, when I look at how Asian I am, I don't feel that Asian either. Because yes, I could speak the language, but there are nuances with like how fluent you are to be able to like feel like you're a local in Asia if you go back. Like I didn't feel that way because I didn't get the education there. I didn't have a job there ever. I no didn't follow the same political stuff, the mainstream popular culture stuff there as closely as I would if I was a native. So I feel there was still a disconnect. So that made me feel like I'm in the middle, but this middle feeling isn't that good because I didn't know how to accept being in the middle yet at that point. But as I got older, I started to be like, well, being in the middle is not so bad because I'm able to grab different things from different ends to make it my own and be able to relate to a lot more people. At the start, when I was feeling that I was in the middle, I didn't understand that being in the middle, I could relate to everything if I tried. Like back then, I didn't try. I just thought, oh, I couldn't relate.
Mm.
But now I was like, oh, I could see it. Oh, I understand. Because I think back then I just thought being able to understand is good, but being able to be like, oh, I was part of that experience, that's even better. But now I accept like, oh, I understand what that is, but did I live that? No, but that's okay.
That's cool, man. And I'm glad you figured that out, that you can try to relate and connect to other people. One of my favorite things, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And it makes sense. Like you
Mhm.
build rapport with people, you connect with them on their experiences. Like, oh yeah, I like basketball too, or whatever. Or yeah, I loved Ed and Eddie. That was my favorite cartoon. Or or like I love jjajangmyeon, or I love these noodles, or whatever. I love that cartoon. And then when you build rapport and trust with people, then you can also share your experiences, and then they're more likely to empathize with you or sympathize with you. And so, like, do you kind of wish that you figured that out sooner? When you were feeling kind of lost, like, oh, I don't really relate to these other Canadian people who, are all about maple syrup and hockey. Do you wish that you kind of figured
I
that out
wouldn't.
sooner?
I don't think I regret or like wish I figured that out sooner. But I do feel like I do regret not trying harder and like figuring it out because I think
Mm,
I was at a point where it was like, oh, this is just how it is and whatever. But it can't be like that because I wasn't feeling happy with this kind of state. It's one thing to be accepting, but then it's one thing to be happy about your acceptance. And at that point, I wasn't happy in a sense, or I wasn't feeling fulfilled. Like I wish I was more of one more than the other at that point. But now I'm like, oh, I am what I am. I'm happy about it. Being in the middle is fine because now I have my podcast where I do talk to people of various backgrounds, and being in the middle help because there are guests who are feeling more like whitewashed, or there are guests where that they are more in tune with their Asian identity, and I could relate to both of them, and I could like talk to a lot more people and understand and help them, with whatever they need help with if don't they seek help.
yeah, I love what you said. Being in the middle is fine. Like you can learn to accept who you are by being in the middle, and it's also human to experience what you are, because any Asian person or any minority or a third culture kid who's going through the same shit can understand, right? If your white classmates or whatever, had to go through what you were going through, then they might have a similar experience, and they might have the same confusion of, like, oh, like, where do I fit in? Right. So I just really want to highlight that, yeah, being middle, you can be happy. You can learn to be happy with yourself by being in the middle and understand and just come to peace at times with just be like, maybe I don't fit in completely in this or there, but that's okay. I'm happy with who I am. And that's what matters. And it's a lifelong journey. That's a good point. I might keep coming back to that. And the other thing I want to mention is how varied the Asian diaspora experience is. in any society in general, there's a huge variety of individuals, like physiologically, mentally, physically. There are some people who are taller and shorter, and there's some people who grew up in countryside and farms, and people who live in the big city their whole lives, and people who grew up around different kinds of people, different qualities of people, different ethnicities, or just one ethnicity within one society. But then, and for example, with I would say within Korean people, like if you live in any seemingly quite homogenous society where everyone's quite similar, like Korea or say Japan, right? Everyone's like very similar. We look similar, and we all follow like this, maybe these rigid hierarchical norms. Like that's perhaps I don't want to say an extreme example, but even then, when you start to talk with the individuals from different walks of life within that country, within that society, you'll see a variety of opinions and experiences that you don't really appreciate until you start talking to and they can be all Korean, right? And there are outsiders within the Koreans, obviously, right? So, and then even within Asian diaspora, there are outcasts, right? Or there are people with different experiences. So I would like to say that for Korean Americans, especially, and for Asian diaspora, I perceive that to be a typical Asian diaspora experience, to be growing up with an Asian enclave. I didn't have that. So I relate differently, and my persperience, my perspective plus experience. Fuck it, it's a word now. Persperience. My persperience is that is different because I didn't grow up with the Korean American communities in, say, I don't know, New York or LA, and so I relate to those Kyopos, those Korean Americans, differently. And when people, kind of sometimes they assume or they ask, "Are you from LA or from New York City?" Like I will know, obviously, Korean Americans from there, but I didn't grow up with that community. So my experience is even more kind of like outside, and I would argue as a result that I have more of a like extreme identity struggle.
Mm.
Yeah. So there's a huge variety of experiences, and I love your podcast because you're delving into the different experiences that people just don't talk about. But now with the power of the internet and podcasting, we can share these stories so people can kind of educate themselves with these unique different experiences, and it'll give us all a broader perspective in life, and it can make us more understanding and compassionate and kinder to each other, hopefully. Is there anything you want to say?
Oh, and you got it perfect. You got it perfect. Like I think what you said, it's good way to end that part of like being in the middle and like being in a different experience than other people that people assume you would automatically associate with when the Asian experience, the Asian diaspora experience is so varied.
Yeah. I also want to ask you, moving into the next topic, Kyle, what's your relationship with your parents like? What was it like growing up, and how is it now?
In terms of my experience, or like how was my relationship with my parents when I was a kid, I would say it was very distant. It was very, I don't want to say cold, but that it wasn't where it was like the TV kind of family where hugs, affirmation, all that stuff. It was very kind of dry, and where it's like there wasn't really that much talking involved. Not, and it wasn't even because of the fact there was like language barrier. It was just the issue. I think at least with our family was like we didn't really know how to express our feelings, or like we didn't find a need to, or like they just were worried about putting food on the table, making sure we have a roof over our head, that kind of thing. At least that's how I saw it. And I guess also because I'm more introverted, I'm more of the type to like keep to myself. So I never really initiated talking to them in the first place. So therefore, we never have those heart to heart conversations that people were like, "Oh, I want that for my life." So it became to now where it's like I do still have a relationship with my parents, but it's not like we go into really deep stuff. Like we talk about how our lives are, what we're doing, and casual stuff. I think that's the extent, but we never really go into really deep stuff or like, how we're feeling, what are our fears, what makes us mad, or like we never get into like, oh, you did this when you were younger and I hated it, all that stuff. It was never like that. And I don't know how to describe my relationship with my parents because I don't think it's a bad one, but at the same time, it's not a good one either because we don't really communicate that much either. I don't know if that
Mm,
makes sense, but it's very much like we don't really argue, but at the same time, it's because we also don't really talk. Like, I don't really
mm,
talk to my dad. Like, I mostly just talk through, if I have something to talk to him, it would be through my mom. Like, I don't really talk to my dad ever, really. It'd be very like, acquaintance kind of talk. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, good. Anything happen? No, that's great. And like, we don't have deep conversation either. So, but do I hate them or like, have a bad thought about them? No, not at all. I think they did the best they could. I really appreciate what my dad has done for the family and all the work he put in. But in terms of like a close relationship, we don't really have that.
mm. Well, dude, I think that's great that you're pretty self-aware and that you thought about these things and that you've come to the perspective. My experience is a little different. I grew up extremely resenting my parents because they were different. Because this could be for all sorts of reasons, variables. Because I'm the youngest of three, and maybe they spoiled me a lot. I mean, this is another topic, but they I don't know how to put it, but they they did the best they could. They were just concerned with trying to survive, as all Asian immigrant parents are, right? And growing up and being an adult and having to pay for to live in my under my own roof. Yeah, to pay rent and make money and be an adult. Like, it can be difficult just to provide for oneself, let alone a family. And so now as an adult, I can appreciate and respect, and I want to honor the struggles and the experiences of Asian immigrant parents, which we'll get into in a bit. But at that time when I was a kid, I just didn't see that. I just couldn't expect. I was just thinking about how unfair life was to me and how unfair it was that my parents couldn't fucking speak English. Like, I was like, why should I learn Korean? Why are you sending me to Korean school? Why don't you learn English, motherfucker? That was I may not have said that as a kid, but that's how I felt, and that was my attitude, because I'm going to school all day and these 7 hours a day, and all we do is speak English. And these kids are calling me chink and go back to China or whatever. I'm not even Chinese, but I don't even know what Korean is, right? I have all these complex, traumas and struggles and experiences. I come home and my parents are yelling at each other. My dad's too busy. They're doing the best they can. But I'm like, this shit's so unfair. Why do I have to go through this shit? I bet that black family over there doesn't have to deal with this shit. I bet that white family, they don't have to deal with the struggles that I'm going through. Who the fuck do I talk to about this shit? And and so I'm just like, well, you parents, you're not going to listen to me. You're not listening to me. You don't even care. It doesn't even seem like you care. And maybe they didn't, but they just weren't in the mental space to do that. So I resented them. And I said, well, why should I fucking learn about Korea, and why should I learn the Korean language when we're living in America? I don't ever want to go to Korea, and not if that's where you're from. Like, because this is America. I'm American, damn it. But now I understand, especially now that I talk with my mom a lot more, and now that I've lived in Korea, and being an adult and all this shit, now I understand the struggles they went through. Now I can understand how and why dysfunctional our family was, and how they were really doing their best. So this is a big point I want to get across to any listeners who go through similar, maybe dysfunctional family, parent, child relationships, is that, look, it may be unfair for you to have grown up through your own unique struggles in life as a kid, with all the associated trauma and baggage and dysfunction and psychological mental disorders or whatever that may be involved, may have been unfair to you. But just think about how unfair it was for your parents, because it turns out more likely than not they went through a lot worse shit than you did. So if you, instead of focusing on your problems and your experiences, if you go out and think about what they went through as kids, and then what their grandparents went as kids, and then what the society as a whole went through, probably going through some war and escaping communism more likely than not if you're from an Asian country, then it makes a lot more sense. And actually, you're the lucky one. You're the fortunate one. You're the one that, if you can even think about these things, if you have even the luxury and the time and the thought process to even consider these things, you're a very fortunate motherfucker. And so,
Mhm.
as unfair as it was for me to go through that shit, and maybe I have some rights, to kind of be upset with my parents. It's understandable. It's also unfair to them for me to judge them and to hold that resentment forever. And in the end, it doesn't help anybody. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. I appreciate that. And as an adult, especially, I want to, especially with other members of my like my extended family and these days I do this a lot with my mom. Is I want to go deep and ask them about everything. I want to ask them about how their childhood was, and I can speak Korean now, which is great. And I want to understand how the world was from their perspective, so I can understand them together. And if I have any resentment or judgments, I can kind of let that go away. Because I want to understand, accept, and then love them more, and then it'll look good on me. Like, I'll feel more prouder of a
Mhm.
person. I'll feel
Yeah.
like a more compassionate person. So like I take a very active role these days in connecting with my family or my relatives. In
Mm.
the past, I didn't care. In the past, or like I did the extreme pendulum swing where I hated my family. I wanted nothing to do with my family and my culture. But now I'm just like, no, I want to understand and then see where they're coming from so that I can relate to them and then connect. And then they can be blessed by having this interaction, this exchange of experiences. And then they can appreciate who I am. And then they'll have a greater appreciation, perhaps, of, their own lives and stuff like that.
Mhm. Mm. I want to
So,
ask you though, like, what was the switch for you where it's like, oh, I don't want to not know anything about my family. I don't want to be where we don't have a connection. Like, what was the switch? Like, for me, is like my perspective is like the thing preventing me from really connecting with my family, my mom and my dad specifically, is that I feel like if I do it, I would feel a lot of pain for some reason, or like I don't want to start asking and then sudden emotions comes out. I don't know what kind of emotions, but I'm just afraid those emotions are not great. So what's the switch for you to be like, I don't care. I'm just gonna ask. I'm gonna go for it.
damn, that's a great question. It'll probably take me some time to unpack that and reflect. What was the switch? It may have been just gradual through certain experiences from my childhood leading into my adulthood. But at some point, there must have been this kind of like, fuck it, I'll just ask. What have I got to lose? I think at some point, maybe I caught glimpses of that attitude throughout my childhood. It might take a bit of time, but that's a good question. At what point did I switch? But I would say, no matter what, deep down inside, we all want that picturesque family life where we're affirming and we're
Mm,
telling each other, I love you, and we're
yeah,
supporting and we listen to each other's struggles and when we connect and we empower each other. I think that's natural, healthy, and optimal, for any
yeah.
family,
I
whatever culture you're
guess
from. Yeah.
I guess the other way to put it is like, when did you get to the point where you're like, it's okay to be vulnerable with your family? I think for me, I haven't gotten to that point yet. I think for you, you have. And like, how did you feel like, or what made you feel like, oh, being vulnerable is not a bad thing? Like, what got you there? Was it something that they did, or like something you encounter from other people and their experience that made you be like, I really need to be vulnerable because I don't want to lose something, or I don't want to like regret? Is it that, or yeah, it's a hard thing
That's
to
a,
be able to open up like that because there, like you
that's,
said, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of experiences that you had that make you who you are. And in order to revert back to like asking the deep questions, starting from scratch again, that's hard.
and that's such a fucking important question. And that is something that stops all of us in our tracks when it comes to connecting with people. Vulnerability. I mean, I can answer, the question in several different ways. And yes, there are different books that I've read and influences and other people's experiences. I also am kind of extreme in a way because like I've gone through some crazy experiences in my life where, like I almost, committed suicide. I almost tried to take my own life before I came to Korea. I was in such a bad state. So going after that, when you come back from something like that, you're kind of just like, well, what have I got to lose? I'm starting from ground zero. And so, every day is a plus one. So, and life is short and all those kind of platitude esque things. I don't want to call it platitudes, but life is short. Like, when are you going to ask the question? When are you going to connect? So you kind of have to pull the trigger. But it could also just be while like taking action and doing confidence in different things, or just I don't know, even just talking to strangers. But I would say one thing I learned was I probably listened to some podcast, read different books, and I learned that vulnerability is power. Vulnerability
Mm.
is a show of status, actually. That's why when you're fucking laid back and with your shoulders back and you look comfortable, that's when you look like you exude power, right? Like the CEO executive, standing, laying back in his chair as an example, that person is someone who exudes comfort because they have so much confidence that no matter what, they're going to be okay. So if you go into any relationship with a degree of vulnerability, it doesn't mean be stupid. It doesn't mean show all your cards necessarily, but vulnerability is power. And especially when it comes to personal relationships, is what I learned. And I would say this is something I learned maybe 6, 7 years ago as I was doing self development, looking into psychology. Vulnerability is power. I cannot stress this enough because if you are honest with your feelings towards someone, and you just say, "Hey, this is how I feel." You're not making a judgment. You're not saying, "Hey, you're a fucking asshole," and like you did this and it was really fucked up. Like I hate you. Not with that energy, not that attitude. But if you just say, "Mom, remember when I was a kid and you did this?" I'm not trying to attack you or anything, but like it really traumatized me, or that experience traumatized me, and this is how I felt. Or to your lover or girlfriend or wife, you might say, when, when you do this, it makes me feel like I'm unappreciated, like you don't care about me. And you're not making an attack on that person. What you're doing is communicating an objective 100% factual experience. That's a 100% factual statement if you're being honest with yourself. Hey, when you do this, it makes me feel like, hey, when you do this, I feel happy. When you do this, that makes me feel so great. Like, not that you talk like that normally to your friends or whatever, but if you're expressing that with sincerity and authenticity, man, people in their subconscious can take that, and they can't fucking deny the truth of your own subjective experience. You have to communicate the objective reality of your own fucking experience, and no one can tell you that you're fucking wrong. No one can do that. Not God, because it's fucking truth. That's the fucking universe. This is how I feel. I'm not trying to attack you, mom, dad, lover. I'm not trying to attack you. But when you did this, when you do this, it makes me feel like this. And then
Mm.
the ball is in their court. How are they going to respond? Because if they get a defensive reaction, well, you're just an asshole. You're just an annoying kid. Or, well, when you do this, it makes me, when you did this, like, it's fucking crazy or whatever. What that shows you two things or several things. I don't know if it's two or three. I'll learn how to count someday. But one, it might be that they're immature in some ways, or that they don't know how to talk to people, and that's understandable because most people don't. Most people don't know how to communicate these things properly in a healthy, constructive way that ends up with us reconciling and loving each other. Two, it has nothing to do with you because you communicated a fact. Mom, dad, when you did this, it made me feel bad. When you did this, like it made me, mom, dad, when we moved around a lot, it really fucking sucked for me because I always felt uprooted whenever I went. Mom, when you ran away several times when I was a kid, I felt abandoned and I didn't want you to come back. I love you. I respect you. I know you went through a lot of shit, but I just want to let you know that this is how I felt. Okay. And if they have any decency or compassion or understanding, they will connect to that. They will reciprocate to that. They have to. Otherwise, they're a shitty fucking person and they'll know that deep down inside. So if someone, my girlfriend or my mom says something to me or a friend says something to me, mom, when you do this, like, I feel like you're not listening to it. Or mom, like, I feel like you don't care about me when you do this. Then if I have any decency at all, I have to consider what they're saying, assuming that they're not lying and manipulative, which they might be. You have to be smart about that. You have to be shrewd as well. But I have to really consider that, like, is is that how you feel? Is that how I'm so sorry, like that wasn't my intention. How can I make it better? Okay. So with that vulnerability in my mind, that's why power is vulnerability. Vulnerability is power, because if you speak the truth, because there's power in the truth, right? You can't run away from it. And the other person has all the subconscious baggage and trigger defense mechanisms, and they lash out at you. Worst case scenario, say "fuck you," "go away," "never see you." The most extreme example. You relieve yourself. You have nothing to worry about. You have nothing to be ashamed about. You were doing the right thing, because if you never communicated that, then it was never going to work out. Like you would never be able to reveal your true selves to each other. And what kind of relationship is that? What kind of life is that when you're always hiding and afraid of what other people are saying? I'm fucking sick of hiding, Kyle. I'm fucking sick of hiding my emotions and stifling myself. And all Asians, most Asians and most Asian diaspora, we're all fucking stuck in a prison of our own minds. Vulnerability is power. Vulnerability is power. So with that power, with that knowledge empowering myself, that's what really allowed me to talk to my parents, and even with complete strangers, right? It doesn't have to be a family about past traumas, but like when I grew up, like this is my experience, this is the shit I went through. And not and this is all in the context of like connecting with people, building rapport, and hopefully being a general positive person, and smiling and presenting yourself to people in a positive, attractive way. People are more willing to listen to you and trust you and believe you. So thanks for listening to my long-winded rant answer. That's what helped me in my relationships, especially with my mom, that allowed me to reconcile and to reconnect. And so vulnerability is power, for one, and two, for my own self-development, as in for my own personal mental, like physiological well-being. If you keep that stress and trauma locked deep in your heart, that stress, the cortisol, that stress is gonna ruin you throughout your life. You're gonna age quicker and all that shit. You're gonna be more susceptible to diseases. And and so physiologically it's going to fuck with you. Spiritually it's going to fuck with you. It's always going to be deep in your soul until you release it, until you come to peace with it. And that won't come until you have that conversation and go back to the past, to that moment. Either at first, like self-reflection, oh, when I was a kid this was fucked up, and then accepting that and loving on yourself, imagining yourself when you were a kid and the shit you went through, and just telling that kid, I love you, I love you, I love you. It was okay what you went through. It's understandable. It's human. Life is hard, but I love you. You're not alone. I'm with you. Right? You say that to your kid self. And then you have that talk with that person or whatever who abused you. God forbid, like, did like molested you or something like that. The worst things you can imagine. And I'm not saying, like our experiences are all different, but just thinking about that. And then if you try to relate honestly and connect to them, not attacking them, not trying to provoke them, but just honestly speaking, human to human, desiring compassion and love for that person when that perspective, and really communicating that in your body language, your tones, your sub communications, and your words. And they react in a negative way, and they are very obstinate. Then, I mean, fuck them. Not in a negative way, not in a resentful way, but like, you did your best. So if you do that for your friend, you have a best friend that you've known 10, 15 years, but they always act shitty to you. And when you try to bring this up to them, well, then that person doesn't need to be your friend anymore, because you did everything that you could. That relieves you of all responsibility, because you did everything that you could that was in your power. You did everything that was in your control. So you wash your hands clean of it. And then, so vulnerability is power, self-development, right? It's not good for your body and your mind and long term. And going to that, if you want to have I argue that, the relationship with your mom, especially, is the relationship you'll have with your kids. Some, I don't know, was it like Freudian or Oedipin psychological bullshit, but makes sense because your mom's the first woman that you know. So, and I know this from other good Korean American Hyungs. Shout out to Eugene and Drew if you're listening to this. That hey, if you don't resolve these issues with your mom, it's gonna your Korean mom. It's gonna show up in relationships you have towards Korean women and your future girlfriend and your future wife. It's inevitable, I think.
Mm.
So it's like, oh, if I want a happy, healthy, fulfilling, loving relationship with a lover, with a girl, then I also have to heal the bullshit and all the resentment and shit that I have with my mom. And again, we're all different. We're all introverts. Like I'm just like, I don't know. I'm Korean. Koreans are known to be like very passionate and whatever. And maybe my family we're very emotional as well. So there could be like, they're different. Every family's different. Every person. You don't have to be crazy or like me. You don't have to be like this intense necessarily, but you can communicate intelligently and effectively with people. No, well, thanks for asking me that. That was a great question. Thanks for interviewing me on your podcast. What kind of Asian are you? This isn't the mime time show. This is
No,
what kind of,
no, I'm interested to know what you're saying because you have a lot of experience and you feel, or at least I feel like you are at a good place in terms of like figuring things out already and dealing with your feelings specifically. Whereas I'm still kind of in the process. But yeah, it's great. Really appreciate your answer.
and I think that's totally great that you recognize that you're still in progress and you don't have to do anything. Everyone, like, you live your own life. If you don't want to connect with your parents, if you don't want to do those things, like I understand, just live your life. For me personally, I realized if I wanted to get to that next level and break through emotional barriers and heal every single bit of trauma and resentment in my heart, I'm far from perfect. I'm far from being where I want to be. But I just want to like imagine myself as like my magnanimous self. Like, and this may have to do a lot with my Christian background. I used to be a very strong, devout Christian. So I have this moral, spiritual, religious framework that I can't change at this point. It's still be part of me. But like, how can I be like Jesus or Buddha? Like, how can I be like the best person that humanity can offer in terms of kindness and compassion? How can I be like Buddha? Even if I don't believe in Buddha, just for my own self, how can I improve myself? Just because that's just who I want to be. Just because I want, and maybe for my own ego, like I want people to think of me as a good person. But just because deep inside, for me, and again, we're all different. We're all trying to like just survive. So you may not have the time or energy to give a shit. But like this is something like, am I a good person? Am I someone who really cares about people, or do I just do it just because I want to look good and I want validation? Like, is it no, just for me, very selfishly. Like, forget everyone else. I want to be a good person just because that's who I want to see with it. I have to live with myself. And that's why I took
Mhm.
these actions. And that's why I took risks. And the results and the fruits of my journey and my labor and my intellectual, emotional, spiritual struggles and communications with people and breaking through these barriers, the fruits, man, have been so sweet. It's been incalculable. It's priceless. And actually, it validates and justifies all the fucking bullshit I ever went through in my life. All the fucking trauma and the moments when I was crying because kids told me, change and go back to China. And kids making fun of my name and my parents yelling at me and beating me or whatever. Like, it justifies all the trauma, all the bullshit, because now I have a greater perspective. And now I can finally share these with other people, especially now with my podcast. And I'm at the age of 29. And I'm doing this because you don't need to be 29, I think, to understand these things. I think someone like me or you could potentially share these values or have these conversations that will make people think about how they want to live their own lives, so that maybe they're listening to this 14, 15, early 20s or whatever, or later on in life, you could be 30 and 40, and then maybe you want to make a change. Maybe you want to take that next step. Maybe You want to break out of your shell a bit. You want to push your comfort zone, knowing that hearing conversations from people like us that, oh, it worked for them, so maybe I can also push my comfort zone. It's very human. So like this is the point of my podcast. It's like I'm 29, but you don't need to be 29. I wish I could have listened to my time when I was 19, when I was 15. I wish I could have smelled my own farts when I was 15, but instead I had to smell my own 15-year-old farts. But my 29-year-old farts are so much more refined, like aged whiskey, with all the all the perseverance and trauma associated with those 29-year-old mime farts. Yeah. Oh man, this is going great. Yeah, but like I said, nothing's perfect, and I'm like I said, I'm also still interested in searching for my identity. I've also come to realize to what I am and what I'm not in a more concrete philosophical or almost systematic framework. Like I'm not 100% Korean, I'm not 100% American. I'm some kind of mix of both, and at the same time, I'm me and my individual with my own unique background experiences and stuff. And that's just who I am. I can't be like those people. I can't be Korean. I can't be American, or however you define that. I can't be mainstream. And you know what? That's okay. Because when you look at the bigger picture, there are enough Korean people being Korean, right? People who are just Korean. In Korean, it's 토종 사람, right? And it just means Korean people who, they didn't grow up in the West or whatever. They're like regular, normal Korean people. And so like, okay, well, that's just nature. There's going to be a lot of people in community or society who are going to have these similar experiences. And then there's always going to be, this is nothing new, even especially in the past 100 years with like, immigration and travel and whatever, borders opening up. Like people have traveled all over the world and had to move into different societies for, since before recorded history, probably. They had to try to assimilate into a different society and whatnot. Like that is nothing new. And so there's always going to be like a group of people, and because of some famine or disaster, there's a subset of that population that says, we need to get the fuck out of here. We need to seek greener pastures because there's like earthquakes and famine or a war going on. While the majority stay, a subset goes out. Okay. And so who can say that one is necessarily better than the other? If you're one of the subsets and which you are a minority essentially, then that is your destiny. Like that is your lot in life. There are enough mainstream people being mainstream. Let them be mainstream and let them enjoy what being mainstream is if they can even appreciate it. But me, the Lord has given me a different lot. So, and I think Asian diaspora, our paths are different, and that's okay. We have different paths. And I would like to think that we are blessed with these unique different experiences. The positive, constructive, active attitude that I would like to embrace is to go back and reconnect with the Tojong Saram, with the mainlanders, right, or the homelanders, and connect so we can have an exchange of experiences that benefits us both. And then what happens is, instead of ego separation, we connect. Instead of resenting each other, instead of like Koreans being like, oh, like the fuck those gyopos, right? They, their parents couldn't make it here, so they went to another country. They had some problems, they got bankrupt, so they went to America. And that's what happened to my dad. From what I understand, we got bankrupt and then we had to move to America, seek better opportunities. So like the worst way is like fuck those Korean Americans, fuck those gyopos. Like they were fucked up and they had some problems, so they had to leave. They couldn't make it here in the jungle of Korea in this competitive society, so they had to fuck off. That's like, let's say, a negative aspect, right? A potential negative judgment that Korean people have of gyopos. And then Korean Americans can be like, oh, well, fuck Korean people. They're backwards. They're still stuck in their Confucian, rigid, hierarchical society and all that bullshit. They're more stifled than we are. So we're better than them. So then there are these Korean Americans who come to Korea and they have this attitude like they're better than other people, whether or not they speak Korean well. And, both those attitudes are fucked up. It doesn't help anybody. It's just all ego.
Mm-hmm.
I say, the better thing would be to be neutral, and the best thing would be to actively reconcile and connect and understand. Because when we do that, we respect each other more, and I believe that raises the energy vibrations of the whole planet. If you can multiply that, that's what I want to do. Is not just be Asian diaspora living our lives, which is great. Again, everyone's an individual. You're free to do whatever you want and live your life. but I kind of want to reconnect with Korean people, and I want to tell Korean people how proud I am to be Korean, how grateful I am to be Korean, and also like be humble and proud that I also grew up in America. And I want to relate these experiences to them, so then maybe they can have a better experience of Kyokpos, of Korean Americans or diaspora like me. Like, oh, that guy's really fucking cool. Mime, he's smart and he's intelligent and he's gone through all this shit and he's such a healthy, happy, positive guy. So maybe they're more Gyopos like him, right? So then because of them meeting me, their perceptions of what a Korean American person can be elevates. I don't know. That's just one thought. Gradually over the course of years, thinking, reflecting on these things, that's where I'm at right now. It's just I'm in the middle, and even in the middle, I'm out a middle of the middle. I'm an outcast in the middle because of my unique experiences and me having a different name and whatever. And that's okay because there are billions of people on this planet, but there can be only be one mime, right? And you don't even have to look at this as like a racial, ethnic, Asian diaspora kind of thing. I mean, this. You can also look at it from this, individualist perspective. There's billions of people. I don't need to be that celebrity. I don't need to be, that entrepreneur. I don't need to be that. I just need to be me, and I need to do better than past me. And I'm going to live my life the best way that I can. I'm be, whatever my values are.
Mhm.
Everyone else can be everyone else. Everyone can be a normal Korean. Sometimes I wish I was a normal Korean, and sometimes I wish I was a, I don't know, normal white or black American person. But there are enough of those dudes being them. No, enough dudes and gals, just being them, and that's their life, and that's how they were raised, and that's only natural. But me, only I can be me, so I need to embrace this. And that's the only thing I can control. What am I just gonna wish that I was a different person every day, like I did when I was a kid? No, that's a fucking waste of time. Such a fucking waste of time and mental energy. Because I wish I was like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. Have mentors, have people you aspire to be like. Like I want to be like that person, but don't want to be another person. Want to be like people you want to be, but don't actually wish you were someone that you're not because you hate yourself or because you resent yourself. And I think that's the most healthy, positive attitude that anyone like. I haven't heard other people or Asian diaspora come at this like this. And I just think this is the most active, positive, karmically efficient way to move about this world as Asian diaspora. And people might disagree and people have their own experiences, but I'm here to put that forth out there because I think if we do this, we really fucking unlock this massive potential upon any individual who really grasps these principles. Because this goes off what you were saying in the First Generations podcast interview you had with Aaron, which is fucking great. I recommend everyone listen to that as well. How because the way that you grew up, you felt like you had different thoughts, that were just not typical, because you did grow up in Hong Kong, so you're not quite like CBC, you're not quite Chinese born Canadian 100%, and at the same time you're not quite Hong Kong or anything. So you have
A
these,
local in Hong Kong.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not a local, and that's okay because only you had those experiences. And yeah, it's happy again. Going back to it, it's okay to be in the middle, and it's okay to have your own experiences, and you can share and communicate these experiences to other people. We all have different paths, and we're on different points, on a spectrum on exploring our heritage and culture. I totally agree with what you said, which was as long as you're living your best way and fulfilled living your life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they reach a certain level of actualization in what it means to be diaspora. Like, for example, I believe you can be Korean American living in America. You never learn Korean or eat kimchi or whatever. And, you're hopefully a good person and you do your job well. You're reliable and consistent. People love you for who you are and all that shit. And you don't have to do any of this search for cultural identity if it doesn't really bother you. I agree with that. You live your own lives. You have the freedom. But for me, I couldn't do that. I would want to know. For me, I have that curiosity. And because there's so much pain and trauma mixed up with identity, for me, this was a must in my life. I can be completely wrong about this and I don't want to offend anybody, but I often suspect that people who are adoptees or Korean diaspora or Asian diaspora who completely live in that Western bubble, in that society that they grew up in, and they never want to connect with their heritage and stuff, I think they're holding themselves back. I think they're scared. I think they have too much pain and trauma, most likely because of how society put them in a box and they didn't want to be put in a box. So they just really, really tried to put them in the box, but they can't hide the fact that they're Asian. What do you think about that?
To a certain extent, I do agree with you, but at the same time, it seems like there are those that are fortunate where they don't have to encounter or they didn't feel like they encounter anything that's bad or unfortunate because of the race. Maybe they are always in a path where them being Asian wasn't an issue, or that they did their best in terms of assimilating to the point where they feel like they're part of mainstream culture and they're not othered, that because they are blessed to be in an environment where they accept people accept them for who they are. So I think we can't discredit those people as well. But yeah, there are people who probably is afraid and thus not trying to seek out their heritage, because there are consequences for being more in tune with your culture, because as you become more in tune with your culture and your heritage, being in America, it means you will automatically have to pick a side when issues related to race, identity, culture comes up. Like, you got to pick a side. Do you think America is doing a good job with upholding the values of the fact that everyone should be equal and all that stuff, and the fact that they might not, and which side would you be on? I don't think some people are equipped to face those kind of questions, those kind of issues. So by not being more in tune with their heritage, they don't even have to think about it. They just have to think of what mainstream is, and being mainstream is easy because it's the most big route that you can take.
Damn, that's a fucking perfect answer. Thank you so much. And I think I needed to hear that because just because I'm stuck in my own mind and with my thoughts all day thinking about this shit. So there's a part of me that thinks like, you're an adoptee or you're Korean American, but you don't really care about your roots. You're hiding from something, and you need to go and you need to push your comfort zone. And I still think there's truth to that, but I also needed to hear you say, but there are people, who are just happy with who they are and they never felt othered. So they're not running away from anything necessarily, which can be completely true. Right. I need to hear that. And so I want to posit that perhaps for some individuals out there, if you're avoiding it because of trauma, and this might brush some people off the wrong way and people in my own community if they hear this, but for example, if you're a Korean adoptee and you come to Korea and you never even learn to try to speak, especially if you fucking come back to the motherland, wherever your heritage is, and they never learn Korean. They maybe a couple of words, but they never really tried to learn. And there's a spectrum even within, just like as there's a spectrum within diaspora, within the Korean American community, there's a spectrum of different people and ideas and schools of thought and whatever. And they're adoptees who fucking learn Korean fluently or very well. Maybe they have a bit of an accent, but they can talk with Korean people in Korean. And then there's people who don't speak it at all, and then there are people who are in the middle. So there's that spectrum within the the Korean adoptee community in general. I personally think that people who refuse to learn Korean, even if they live in Korea for a few years or for longer, it's just like, why are you even here? This is the opportunity to get in touch with your roots and learn the language. Like, it only helps you to learn the language if you live in another country, in a foreign country that you didn't grow up in. If you're going to live there for any length of time, learn the language. Especially if it's related to your own ethnicity and your heritage. You should learn it. You're at a detriment. You're holding yourself back, I would argue. For me personally, I've seen people. I think there's a stubbornness there. Like, life wasn't fair to me. I didn't grow up learning Korean, so even if I come back to Korea, you know what? I don't have to learn Korea. And like, subconscious, like, life is unfair. So you know what? People should just speak English to me because they shouldn't judge me and assume that I speak Korean, even though I am Korean blood. They shouldn't assume that. The society should change. Yeah. And I think that's fucking stupid. You're not going to change the society.
Wow. Yeah. I agree with you, but at the same time, looking at it where it's like a lot of times we put what we think will be best for the society. But for other people, they might be just thinking what's best for their own feelings, their own comfort, and what's best for themselves. So that's why they're not learning the language. Can we blame them? No, because of the fact that it's their own journey. Because we're looking at it, well, we did it, so that means, and I think there's value for everyone if you choose to do it. But who knows? We don't know their story. They might be like the trauma there of learning language or whatever it may be. So it's tough because I understand where you're getting at, but I also want to emphasize like everyone chooses what they want to do based on their own life, and we can't really we could be like, oh, we wish they could do it another way, but ultimately it's their life and it's their choice. So if they want to choose to live their life in whatever way they want, then we just gotta accept that if they are someone that you like and you treat as a friend, if they choose to be like that, you can't do anything other than to accept, right? So that's my thought on that.
Damn, that's a fucking good answer again. Thank you so much, Kyle. Yeah, I definitely needed to hear that. And I need to talk with a calm, rational person like you to kind of offset, my passion perspective and my judgmental behavior. And I think the reason behind it is, yeah, I did it, so why don't you do it? Right? I have to emphasize how strongly I feel that personally because I didn't grow up speaking Korean. And I have to, caveat, like I did grow up in a Korean speaking household. So I did hear the phonemes. I did learn Hangul, when I was a kid, but I never put it to use. So I had those advantages when I came to Korea. Even though I didn't speak or write, I at least had some foundation when I was a kid. So I'm luckier than adoptees in that. So it was easy. That is a huge advantage that I have. So that's why
And
actually I give adoptees a big pass most of the time.
I'll also give adoptees a big pass because we forget there's also a layer of what if no, at least for how they would feel or how they think. I'm not saying I speak for them, but I could only assume the reason they probably don't feel like so strongly of like learning the language or anything like that is maybe by them doing that they might have feelings about how if they do that they are hurting their adopted family's feelings of like, oh, you want to go back and learn the language, you want to forget about us and all that stuff even though we raised them and all that. I think there's layers to it. I'm not saying that could be a reason, but I could see that could be a reason as well.
Yeah, and like you said, it's everyone's lives. Everyone lives their own lives, and they have their reasons. You don't know what they're going through. For me, also, I think of it as like I relate so strongly to adoptees, and I feel so close to them that I feel like we're so similar. So I see myself in them, and because I judged myself so harshly for not learning, for not knowing Korean when I was a kid, and then I had to come to Korea. That I look at adoptees and say, why haven't you learned this by now? Or why aren't you at least trying? I understand. I'm not an idiot. I understand you didn't grow up with a Korean family, so it's more difficult for you, sure.
Mm.
But why aren't you at
Oh,
least trying? But again, this is not personal to them.
mhm.
This is just me. This is maybe an issue I need to resolve.
Yeah.
I need
Another
to stop
thing
being
is,
so self-judgmental. Sorry.
yeah, another thing is it could be where they take on the perspective of like embracing your culture doesn't mean necessarily you must know the language. Because I think if that was the case, then a lot of people who have their second language in the other language, are we saying they're in tune with that particular language culture? Like, are we going to give a pass to like say white people who knows the language? Are we going to treat them like, oh, they're Korean if they know Korean? Not necessarily. So you can't really base it on where if they don't know the language, then they're not actually in tune with their cultural heritage and all that stuff. At least how I see it. Like there are other cases where, yeah, if you don't know the language, it's hard to know the whole culture completely. But I see that. But at the same time, like maybe they're like feeling like, oh, I'm born Korean, so I am Korean regardless, even if I don't know the language.
Yeah, I think that can be valid too. I would say that language and culture are obviously very closely interrelated. But you're right. I mean, yeah, Korean people can know speak English fluently, but have like very little experience or connection. There are Korean people in Korea who speak English fluently, but that doesn't mean they have like the cultural like mindset or perceptions and experiences and yada 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 of say an American, even though they have the same accent. So I understand what you're saying. For me though, I also just look at, I mean, I'll also posit this, and again, this is only if you're interested in I feel like an asshole. If you're interested in self-actualization and getting to that next level and having a deeper appreciation and experience of your heritage and identity, I would strongly recommend that you learn the language if you don't know it. But again, this is just coming from me because I had my own personal cultural emotional baggage hangups with this stuff, that it was so important for me to overcome it so that I could come to a point where like no matter how much Korean I learn, I speak it almost fluently now, I'm never going to be Korean. And then that kind of laid to rest. Oh, I've been trying everything that I can for years to learn Korean culture and the language and have conversations with people from all ages and walks of life in Korean. And I will still never be Korean. There are other Kyopos, other Korean Americans who can really seamlessly, just like Korean people never assume that they're not Korean. But for me, it's just Chicana. It's just obvious, right? After just like a few sentences or whatever, I'm like, damn it, they found out that I'm a spy or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's okay. I've come to accept it. I mean, it still bothers me, but do you understand Korean? And I'm like, I understand everything you're saying. Like, why are you bringing that up? Let's move on with the conversation. I get defensive, but that's not their fault. This is something I just need to get over. You're right. But I will posit that it's enormously beneficial. I mean, it's incalculable, and that's just the reality of it. If you're going to live in any society, whether or not it's your own like heritage, it's just like if I'm Korean and I'm gonna spend some time in China or Japan, I will want to learn the language. Yeah, I'm gonna learn the language, but that's just me because I like languages, and I'm nerdy like that, and I'm the kind of person who wants to speak multiple languages. Like that's kind of my ideal version of myself, that like I speak multiple languages. Because like if I couldn't learn Korean, then I would the way that I have, then I think of all the conversations and friendships and relationships that I would never have been able to build just because I can't communicate to that people.
Yeah.
I broke through that fucking wall. This is such a huge boost to my confidence because I always thought something was wrong with me. Something was defective with me because I didn't learn Korean. So maybe actually adoptees don't have that. Like they don't. Yeah, actually this makes sense. Adoptees wouldn't have that because they didn't have that opportunity. But I grew up with a Korean family. So why didn't I learn it? What's wrong with me? This is fucking huge. What's wrong with me? So I thought I was too dumb and stupid. I'll never learn Korean. Like you have no idea. And like I just like hated myself how much because I couldn't learn Korean. I must be so fucked up. So many other Korean Americans can speak Korean, which wasn't true. There were some like me.
I guess you can always like be like hateful if the fact like you see that adoptee knowing other languages, but they choose not to know Korean. Let's just say they know French, Italian, all that other stuff as well, but they never got to learning Korean. Then you can question them like, why is that? How come you never attempted to learn the language that you being a Korean adoptee?
I know why. I know why. Because, and I could be wrong, everyone, but it's because you have emotional baggage, and every single time you try to speak Korean, people judge you, and you feel like shit because it brings up all this trauma and identity. Every single time you try to focus, and I know because I've been there. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to be othered. I know what it feels like to be confused. And I'm saying I think you could break through that, and you don't have to deal with that shit anymore, or you can come to peace with it if you at least try. If you really try and push your comfort zone and at least have the pride to say, hey, I tried. I'm an adoptee. I didn't grow with this, but at least I tried and I did this much. You did everything that you could. You did everything that was within your control. And now like you can come to peace with because you can't be too stressed. You shouldn't be stressed. I mean, it's a universal principle. Like what's not in your control, man, you just have to learn to let it go no matter how hard it is. And that goes for anything in life. So for me, I found like I have an opportunity when I came to Korea. Before I came here, like, oh, I go to Korea? Well, shit, I better learn. Maybe. And that was a time in my life when I wanted to reinvent myself. This was like after I almost committed suicide. And it's like, well, this is ground zero, a new day. What can I be? What can I do? Who can I do? Actually, literally, who can I do? Like, how can I stop being a virgin? I will go to Korea and solve this problem. I will learn Korean and get laid the first time in my life, which I did. and I succeeded. I got laid. I got laid, and I learned Korean. Um, uh, uh, I mean, that's another conversation about like dating in confidence with women and getting out of your shell as a man and stuff. But the benefits are incalculable. I have this confidence because what I thought in my own mind when I was a prisoner in my own mind I thought was inconquerable. I've overcome it, and I'm still overcoming it. I'm still learning Korean. It's not perfect, but now I'm just like I'm so proud of myself. I can live
That's
with
great.
myself. So those adoptees, I'm not throwing shade out there, but if you're learning French and Spanish, and I actually know adoptees who do this, like they're in Korea, but they're learning other languages. I'm just like, you're not. I know what you're doing. You're avoiding Korean because it's a painful childhood trauma baggage. I get it because I went through something similar, not quite the same, but I get it, and I feel sorry for you. I don't want to pity you, I can understand what that feels like, and I want to let you know that I'm so happy and proud of myself for pushing through that barrier and at least trying my best. And you know what? If you're a fish in water, you don't know what water is until you're fucking flopping in the dry air out of the ocean. You don't know what that's like. But when you go back into that, when you go into that water and it goes through your gills and you're like, oh, that water, I don't actually know what the fish's experience is like. Then I appreciate what speaking Korean, understanding Korean is 1,000 times more than any other Korean person who's born, raised, like speaking Korean. I appreciate 1,000%. They have no idea how much I appreciate it. They have no, you have no idea how much I appreciate. Like sometimes, like, damn, I'm having this whole conversation with my girlfriend in Korean. When I was a kid, one, I thought I'd never get laid, and two, I never thought I'd be able to speak Korean with a girl. Never thought a girl would love me for who I am, and that we'd be speaking in Korean together almost fluently. Do you have any idea how much that means to me? That means the world to me. That's why I came here. That's what I came here to do. Not just to get laid, but just to become a better version of myself. Just to prove that it can be fucking done. Just to prove that all the shit that I told myself as a kid, all the lies, I was in prison, I had to break through. Freedom. Oh my fucking God. And if I can do it, if a fucked up case like me can do it, then other Asian diaspora can do it too. I'm not better than anyone. I went through some fucked up shit. And because the unfair advantage I have is because of how fucked up my situation was, the pain made me choose the side of pushing through the barrier, to push through the sides. Now, I'm not knocking on any adoptees, and look, it's your life. I want to be careful and understanding. But for me, I just want to put that out there so that maybe there's some people who might benefit from considering what I have to say. Yeah, but thank you so much for. I also need counterpoints from you as well. You make me look good.
Very defined.
Yeah. Okay. There's just like one or two more things I want to talk about here, just to emphasize everyone, because there's all this pain associated with identity, and it's intrinsically associated with like my self-realization and activation of like being the best version of myself, whether that's like dressing well or being confident with women. And I'm not saying I have everything down pat. I'm not saying I'm a Casanova or anything like that, but just to be beyond my wildest dreams. Like didn't even imagine when I was a kid that I could be this at this level, or when it comes to making money or being competent in things and being a reliable, consistent like person who can get shit done. These things are like very intrinsically tied because I came to Korea to be this kind of person who can speak Korean and get shit done and get laid. So this might not apply to you. Take it for what it is. Okay, the next thing I want to say is that we are fucking trailblazers, man. Like I said earlier, where were you when I was 15? I wish we had your podcast and my podcast and other awesome podcasts that have been coming out, and communities, online communities. There's like Asian Hustle Network and, Badass Asian Dudes. Shout out to my Badass Asian Dudes that have been coming out with the advent of online digital media and social media. I wish we had all this when we were kids, right? It could have saved us a lot of time. We could have felt a lot less lonelier. We could have empowered ourselves in all kinds of ways, emotionally, spiritually, financially, business-wise, whatever. If I could have gone on the internet and find these voices, it would have accelerated my growth and helped me get over my bullshit, all the stupid bullshit that I was going through. I could connect with it. I could like have a better grasp on things. So I'm
Hmm.
so grateful for your podcast, man. I would say by talking about these issues, first of all, we have an enormous privilege at this time in our lives where we have the internet and we have like income and we're not just trying to survive, but we're trying to thrive. I say we have this enormous privilege, and I say responsibility and duty. With great power comes great responsibility and all that shit. We have this responsibility. I take it upon myself. That's why I have my podcast, for the sake of not only preserving and honoring our heritages, but also for the sake of benefiting and enriching and empowering future generations. And to have these conversations and share them digitally across the world. And that when we acknowledge, accept, understand, and come to peace with our past and our societies and who we are as families and individuals, then we're empowered to forgive, to connect, to love, and to thrive. Yeah, and that's just what I wanted to share with you.
That's great. And I think you're on your way. You're doing a great job. You're helping a lot of people with your podcast and just sharing your wealth of wisdom. And even if they listen and they decide not to listen to you, at least you put it out there, and maybe they'll come back around and it'll be a value of them later on. I mean, like I said earlier, it's a lifelong journey, and as long as you have this out there, they can come back to it later on when they're ready for it.
That's right. And you might not be ready for it. Like maybe when I was 15, even if I had your podcast or my podcast, maybe I just wouldn't have been ready for it. That's also possibly true. Is there anything you'd like to say to maybe younger listeners out there? They don't have to be young, or anyone out there who's going through maybe issues with their Asian diaspora identity, trying to figure themselves out. Like if you could talk to your 15-year-old self, what would you say?
I would say don't rush it because with time comes the ability to process things at a different rate. You figuring out stuff at 15 doesn't mean it's perfect because that's just your 15-year-old brain at work. Who knows if you figure it out when you're 20, when you're 25, when you're 30, and so on and so forth, that those kind of realization will hit you even better, or like it will inspire you even more. That said, I think, again, don't rush it. Everyone has their own kind of trajectory, their own journey. And what you just got to do is just focus on yourself, focus on just being a better person at that point. And if that means you have to not worry too much about your identity at that point, that's fine. You can come back to it. It's not like you'll never get back into figuring out what your identity is, because it will follow you for the rest of your life, because identity is such a big part of who you are. It's ingrained in you. Like you want to know who you are, regardless of you're like 5, 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 years old. You'll always be curious as who you truly are. And if it means you finding out at age 99 and you die when you're 100, at least, you live a life trying to figure it out. And that's worthy already. You don't need to figure things out right away. No one figures it out right away. For everything in life, people are always trying to find out the best answer, the best solution. And it doesn't always come to you when you want it. It comes to you when you're ready, when you need it. And yeah, I think everyone has their own timing, and put less emphasis on figuring things out and just focus more on just being a good person. Because I think being a good person will lead you to good things, and but good things will lead to, you figuring things out. Because I think good things always brings out good feelings and good results regardless. So if you do good things now, maybe later on, then good things like finding out what you're truly about will come out because of the fact you did good things beforehand.
Damn, that's so great. That's fucking perfect answer. And I wish I heard that when I was 15. Yeah. Take your time. You don't have to rush things. You can come back to these issues later. And in the meantime, be a good person, because good things come to good people. Fuck, that's dope. Wow. Kyle, if people want to reach out to you and follow your podcast, how should they do it?
First off, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. You offer a lot of good gems, and gave your perspective that I think people really need, especially now. We need more Asian diaspora perspectives and experiences out there and stories. And I think you're doing a great job. Keep going. I want to hear more from you and your guests. And for those who's interested in checking out my podcast is What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. And I interview Asian diaspora on their life stories and experience. And I just want to make sure that everyone gets a platform to share their voice, their creations, their life, their stories, and in the process, hopefully help those that are feeling lonely being Asian diaspora be less lonely, and for them to know that they're not alone and they got a support network if they seek out for it. And find the podcast on all major digital platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, all that stuff. And if you want to follow the socials, you can follow the podcast on Instagram at What Kind of Asian Pod. And I appreciate people, DMing me if they find something that they relate to and they just want to chat about, the Asian diaspora experience, or just have any questions about, just living Asian diaspora life. Because I think I want to be that person to help those that are confused or just want someone to talk to. So reach out, What Kind of Asian Pod. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak on things I really care about and love talking about.
Kyle, I can't thank you enough for doing what you do for your podcast and coming on to the show. It really means a lot to me. I think this is one of the best conversations on Mime Time so far, really. Everyone, my Asian brothers and sisters, and my diaspora third culture kids, please go check out Kyle's podcast and subscribe. I'm sure you'll find something related. Like, I'm going to go through a bunch of them. And, it's kind of sorry. Like, I wish I asked you, what your favorite episodes were. But also check out First Generations podcast, the interview that
Yes. Mm-hmm.
that Kyle has there.
Shout out to Aaron.
Yeah, shout out to Aaron. I'm going to meet you soon. Yeah, everyone, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Mime Time. This has been fire, and I really appreciate it. And again, if any of this resonates with you, please share it with a friend and reach out to me or reach out to Kyle. Have a great week. Please tune in next time. All right. Peace. Oh.